Sitting in Israel listening to classes here. Good morning, good morning. Okay. We're going to continue. We're going to continue the sheet we started yesterday about Hashgacha Pratis. And we're on page 120. We started to say we didn't have much time, so we only began that the whole world is divided into 4 categories: Daimim, Tzemeach, Chai, and Medaber. So we have the things that are inanimate, plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the human kingdom. However, within each one itself, there's so many categories. There is many categories in Daimim. He started with the inanimate. There are rocks, the ordinary rocks, and there are rocks that are precious stones, and there's earth. And in each one, there's so many different categories. And in each one of the, even in earth, there's so many different categories. Thank you very much. This is for the, I wrote that on top here. So many different categories. And basically, it gets broken down to more details and more details and more details. There's vast amount of categories in Daimon. The next line, the Chemit Semeach, and the same is with the plant kingdom. So everyone knows there's all sorts of things growing, all sorts of trees growing, all sorts of fruits growing, all sorts of vegetables growing, even grass, there are differences. So in the category of Tzemeh, there's so many differences. Chai, we have all sorts of animals and species. There's people that study this their whole life, all the different kinds of animals, and in birds, wild animals, domestic animals, worms, fish. I mean, there's no end to the categories that there are in the animal kingdom. And then there's Medaber, which is the human kingdom. I think they say that today there's about 8 billion people. So there are probably 8 billion categories because people are so different in terms of their characters, different in terms of their talents, different in terms of their intellectual capacity. Everybody is different than the other. Every single one of these details, which we just listed, in each one of these groups, if this is unique, in other words, let's say this is a flower that's yellow, and this is a flower that's red, that means that the chayes of Hashem that's giving life to this flower is also different than the chayes of Hashem that's giving life to that flower. If this is a big fish and this is a little fish, if this is a worm that looks like this and this is a caterpillar, then the chayes of Hashem is different here than it is there. And if you have 2 stones, one is this kind of diamond, and one is a different kind of diamond, and one is a pearl, and one is a different kind of a gem, it's all because the chayes of Hashem is different for each one. In fact, the reason why they're different physically is because the chayes is different chayes. The chayes of Hashem that gives life to this detail, that's its soul. Hamagadloi, if it's something that grows, it makes it grow. Umanhigoi, and it leads it, the whole protein yanov, all the details of its life, whatever life it has. From the day that it came into existence, Adrega Achran, to the last moment of its life, the color of Nifsid, when it's no longer in existence. He's going to give an example now from Tzemeach. The reason why I brought this Maimah is to get an example of how the Baal Shem Tov And all the masters of Chassidus explain what does Hashgacha Pratis mean. So, for example, in the plant kingdom, there's so many different categories. Ilonis, trees, tfuis, or things that grow in a field, Yerokes, vegetables, asavim and shoyim, grass, b'chol min yeshribui mufli. In each group, there's tremendous amount of different kinds. Kimay bi'lonis, ribui otzum. Let's say trees. There's so many different kinds of trees in the world. One is different than the other. Be'etzem husay. First of all, the trees themselves are different. Ubipirium, and the fruit that they produce is different. The same is with grass, or the shoyim. I think there are two different kinds of grass, both mean grass. There's so many differences amongst the grasses that grow. For example, there are some that Mesamer Refuah, they heal. So many medicines come from grass that grow, that they have a property in it to bring healing. And then there's also samimobis. There's a lot of them that are like, that's where drugs come from, also grows. And unfortunately, this kills people. So you see that they're different from one end of the spectrum to the other. This grass is something that's so potent and powerful that somebody's sick, by taking this medicine from the grass, they become healthy. And this is something that if somebody's healthy, they, God forbid, lose their life. So on the outside, they might look the same. This is green and that's green. This is growing and that's growing. But in essence, they're very different from each other and the property that they have. And the difference between Mareim, the way they look, the Tivam and their nature, and each individual category, there's such a vast amount of details, you can't even count it. Now that we're talking specifically about the plant kingdom, every single one of them, has a very specific chayas that's reserved and limited to this particular creation. Asher chayas ahi, that chayas is its soul that gives it life. So just like a human being has a soul, and just like an animal has a soul, a plant also has a soul, and that soul is what gives it life and allows it to grow and so on. And all the movements of this plant also are guided by this soul from the moment it says me better adama, from the moment that it comes out of the ground until the end of its life. And what's the end of its life? That's also something with the Hashgacha Pratis determines how its life will be ended. Whether it'll be that somebody will cut it, a farmer is going to cut it with a tool, with the proper equipment, lahavi to elis anira, and this is going to bring benefits. B'mir habalachai, that the animals will have what to eat. So that's one possibility, that when this grass or whatever it is that's growing, its life ends, but it's going to end in a useful way, in a way that it'll bring benefit for the animals. Or sometimes it's possible, lemir masregel, it gets trampled, lead to Alasanira, and we don't see what the purpose is. We don't see. So, what was the purpose of this growing and being trampled? Sometimes it's not trampled, it's not cut. Just after growing for a long time, it eventually dies out. The kolzeh, these differences, there's a judgment in heaven. What should happen to this blade of grass? If it should be trampled, if it should be cut, if it should be just allowed to live through its life until it withers away. כל אחד יש לו נפש הפרטי, שזהו חייס ומנהיגה. In a sense, you can say, being that every blade of grass has a purpose. I once gave a class about this subject, and someone said that scientists in the recent years found that every blade of grass has its own imprint. You know, we have a print on the fingers, fingerprint. Every person, we all look the same, but every person has a different print. In grass, a blade of grass, every blade of grass also has a different imprint. What is imprint?
No, blade of grass.
Oh, what is blade of grass? Write the word grass, Grass. And a blade means one. So there's a mishpat, the judgments. So I'm saying what we can understand, this soul that he's talking about is Hashem created for a purpose. It's beyond human comprehension to even begin to understand what's the purpose of a grass growing. Especially when you look outside the window and you see grass in front of your house, and then you think, and this same grass exists all over the globe. Hundreds and thousands and millions and billions and gazillion blades of grass, and they all have a purpose. In fact, every single one has a purpose, where it is and why it's there. And that's its soul. So being that it has a purpose, depending on the purpose, that will determine how its life will end. There's a judgment if it'll end this way, that way, or the other way. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol na'eh b'dvaro. Oh, here he says in the next word, I said it a little bit too soon. Every blade of grass has its own shape. Although kulam b'tabanus umara osgula klolis, generally speaking, they all look the same. Nevertheless, be'etzem gufam, in essence, each one has something which is different than the other. And that's what I'm saying, that scientists have now discovered, yes, that each blade of grass has its own imprint. And the reason for that is, every one of these blades of grass and every plant has a very specific chayas that's limited and reserved specifically for this. And where's the source for this? In Gemara. Not Gemara, but Medrash. It says in the Medrash, there is no blade of grass down here in this world that doesn't have an angel that's in charge of it up there, that strikes it, grow. As we know, Medrash always speaks in these metaphoric terms, but it means that it has a source, which means just like down here, there are billions and trillions of blades of grass, there are billions and trillions of angels, and each angel is in charge of another blade of grass. And this angel is what's in charge of this grass growing. So that's the soul that we're talking about. And it leads it with all the details of its grass life. It's all by the way Hashem determines what should be the destiny of this blade of grass, a blade of grass. And now he says something even more incredible, something more fascinating. It's known, Dinyan Hashgacha Pratis, regarding this subject of Hashgacha Pratis. Before the Baal Shem Tov, this was not so clear that every little detail is Hashgacha Pratis. I remember reading in a sefer that someone writes that if a person believes that if a leaf falls down from a tree, it's with a purpose, he's foolish. Again, it was written by a great Torah scholar, So maybe there's more depth in it, but on the surface, it appears to be saying things like that are just happening because of nature. But the Baal Shem Tov said, if a leaf falls down off a tree, there's a judgment in Shemayim that this leaf, the time has come for it to fall down. So the Baal Shem Tov says, Lo zu levad. Not only the kol protei tnuas hanevroyim l'minayim, that all the movements of everything in creation is v'ashgacha pratis mehaberi is barak from Hashem Himself. By the way, Hashgacha pratis, we know, doesn't mean Hashem puts an angel in charge, but He Himself is in charge of each blade of grass. How's that possible? Because you're thinking about a human being couldn't do that. A computer couldn't do that. But the Eibishter is infinite. Let me give you a little bit of an understanding. Now, you know what? I'm going to wait till we finish this part. So what is he saying? Not only is everything b'hashgacha pratis, which means Hashem makes a decision that this grass and that grass should be this way, that way, the other way. Oidzah is something even deeper. The Tnua pratis, the Nivra prati, this specific detailed movement of this specific blade of grass, yesh lo yachas kloli leklolis kavanas habriya. It's part of the global, universal purpose for the reason why the whole world was created. I don't know if you grasp how powerful that is. Maybe to create the world is standing since the beginning of creation, 5,782 years. A lot of things are going on in this world. There are different kinds of people, good people, evil people. But we know the ultimate purpose is Torah and Yidden. But here he's saying that even a blade of grass, a leaf that falls off a tree that's planted in the middle of a jungle, and all the little plants in the jungle, everyone has a purpose. And all these things are part of the collective purpose and the whole purpose of creation of the universe. And if that wouldn't be there, the whole purpose of creation, which Hashem wanted a dwelling place in this world, would never have been fulfilled. Dugma, page 121. And now he's giving an example. Let's take a blade of grass and let's observe its life. Listen to this. Tenuas echad harishoyim, the movement of one blade of grass, which is growing be'imkei hayar, in the depth of a forest, or be'echad haharim hagvoyim, or one of the real high mountains, or ba'amokim hayesa amukim, one of the deepest valleys. Why is he choosing these examples? Asher lo avar sham ish. It's not a place where people walk. When you think of things, okay, it makes a difference for a person. If there's a tree growing in front of my house, it makes a difference to me, whether I'll be comfortable, not comfortable, I'll have a shade, and that'll make a difference of how I'll learn Torah and do mitzvahs. But what about a blade of grass that's growing in the jungle somewhere where nobody walks there? It's growing on top of a mountain where no one climbed there. It's in the depth of a valley where nobody walks there. Lo zu bilvad. Not only the Tenuas hadeshahu, the movement of this blade of grass. Liyamina ismaile, when the blade of grass moves because there's a wind blowing, it turns to the right, turns to the left, it goes forward, it moves back. It looks like it's davening Shemona Esrei. It's going this way, going that way, this way, the other way. That's what it does all day. It doesn't walk, it doesn't jump, it doesn't go eat, but you see it constantly moving with the wind in all these directions. It's all up. Hashgacha pratis is by a divine providence. Asherhu Yisbarach Gazar Omer. Hashem decreed. And what did he decree? Asher desha pratizeh, this blade of grass, which is in this deep jungle. Should live so many months and so many hours. And during the time of its lifetime, it should turn, which means it should move 6,332 times to the right, 5,422 times to the left, and 4,062 times forward, and who knows how many times back. Every detail is counted. And there's a purpose for that. By the way, today, people have these things that they put on, and it counts every step that they make. If you told somebody before that someone's counting every step you make, how could you count every step I make? Today they have computers that you have it attached to yourself, and it counts every step you make. There's an accounting. Hashem has an accounting, and everything is with a purpose, because the numbers mean something. Like we know in the Mishkan, this is so high, this is so low, or in Torah, this is 4, this is 5, this is 7, this is 8, this is 3. It all corresponds to spheres. So there's a purpose why this blade of grass has to move to the right, and not to the left, but to the right so many thousands of times. Or to the left, it's many more thousands of times. I mean, just to concentrate on one blade of grass could keep us busy for who knows how long. And we're saying this is happening to millions and billions and trillions of blades of grass in the world. So not only are we saying, not only is Hashem saying that there's a purpose why Hashem made this, because normally I would think, listen, once there's a wind, it's natural that the blade of grass moves. How could you say that there's a purpose why it's moving so many times? Hashem has a purpose in making a wind today, but once there's a wind, everything's going to be moving around. The clothes on the line are going to be going back and forth. Grass will be going back and forth. People's hair will be flying in the wind. People's hats will fly off, but it's all part of a end result. Being that Hashem wants a wind, there's a famous story in Gemara. And there are people who think that this might be the way Hashgacha Pratis works, that Hashem makes big things happen, but the little things that happen, once the big thing is happening, then automatically little things have to happen. So again, if Hashem wants that today should be windy, I can understand. There's a purpose that it be windy. Now that it's windy, you look around, you see millions of blades of grass moving, trees are moving, and other things are moving in the wind on the floor. There are leaves that are moving, papers that are moving. Every single movement is from Hashem? No, once there's a wind, then the movements are already happening automatically. There's a story in Gemara, quite a famous story. So you might have heard it. Rabbi Yosef Maker Shabbos. This is a person, the Gemara says that he gave a lot of honor to Shabbos. And he always make a point to buy the best fish that he can get, or to go fishing for the best fish that he can get. And the Eibishter performed a miracle that as a result of that, he was rewarded with a lot of wealth. And what was the story? That I guess it must have been the person who was the head of his community, of his city, who was very wealthy. He had a lot of forests, and he had boats, and he had a lot of real estate, and he had a dream. Or it was not a dream. He saw in the stars, or stargazers told him they saw in the stars that all his wealth is going to go to the Jew, Rabbi Yosef Maker Shabbos. So he was hysterical. That means he's going to lose all his money. It's going to go to that person. So what did he do? He thought of an idea. He sold everything that he had, and he bought a big, beautiful diamond. And he said, I'm going to make sure to walk around with this diamond with me all the time. So there's no way that my possession can end up in his hands. And to make sure that it's with him all the time, he sewed it into his hat and never took his hat off his head. He walked around all the time with a hat, and he had it with him. One day he was walking on a bridge, and all of a sudden the wind started to blow, totally unexpected, and boom, his hat flew off his head, went into the water, and was gone. I'm not sure if the Gemara says this, or when people tell the story, they just add their own little bit, that he was happy, at least it's not going to go to that Jew of Yosef Maker Shabbos. But the end of the story was that he either bought a fish or he went fishing for Shabbos and brought home this big fish. When he opened the belly of the fish, They found the diamond. They had no idea what happened to him, but they found the diamond. They became wealthy. So here Hashem made a wind that his hatch has fallen off, and there's a purpose. The purpose was that this person should be rewarded. Obviously, there was a reason why he had to have a loss. What about everything else that happened once there's a strong wind? I remember years ago, I used to have a class that I gave in Manhattan. When I first started the class, I made flyers, and I went around myself in Manhattan to hang them up in different places. So I had this at the shake case, I put it down, and I took out one paper to hang up. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, there was such a strong wind, every single paper that I had went flying all over the place. I was sure I'd have people come to the class from New Jersey probably, because it went all over. So I don't know what the purpose was. Maybe it was something else. But according to Baal Shem Tov, no, every single paper that flew reached a person somewhere. We don't even know what the end result could have been. I remember I had a student that actually came to the class in Manhattan. And when I asked her how did she get to the class, she said she saw the flyer hanging in a restaurant. I didn't hang it up. So obviously someone hung it up. That person has no idea that this girl came to the class. She went to that class for Man Heights to study here. From here, she went and she got married. She already married all of her children, which means there are generations of people learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. And the person who hung up the flyer has no clue that they have this chutz. So when winds blow, you don't know what else is happening. But the question is, okay, Hashem has a purpose why the wind is blowing. What about all the other things that happen by the way? So Hashem says there is no by the way. That's also part of Hashem has that in mind, every detail. And not only that, but all these details are part of the collective purpose, the whole purpose why the world was created in the first place. Which means, by collectively bringing together all the activities and all the movements, all the details of the millions and billions and trillions of different things in the world, and from all the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of different species and kinds that there is in David, but all together, the purpose of the creation is fulfilled. So this is what I wanted to point out to you. One could say, but it's inconceivable. It's impossible. How could you imagine such a thing? It just doesn't. It blows the mind, literally. But remember, we said when you talk about infinite, what's closer to infinite? The Atlantic Ocean or a drop of water? Which is closer to infinity? What? The ocean. No, the answer was that they're equal distance. If it's infinite, then how far is the ocean from infinity? Infinite. How far is a drop of water from infinite? So if Hashem could concentrate on one detail and concentrate how it should act and how it should live and how it should be, so Hashem is infinite. One detail is no different to him than a million, billion, trillion, and many trillion details because he's infinite. It's all the same. So Hashem is not only aware of everything that's happening, he's the one who is causing all this to happen, different things around the world, every little detail that's happening. That's Hashgacha Pratis. And from this, we can derive something very important in Avodah. Mizeh Yetzalanu Inyan Omeg B'Avodah. Is born in a person would think about this. Uma indesha echad prati. If one single blade of grass, gam mispar tnu esav, even the amount of movements that it makes and the kind of movements that it makes, is bashgacha pratis b'chol prati pratius inyani tzrachom. So therefore, certainly this applies to a human being. So therefore, a person's effort should be mainly and primarily not to get in the way and not interfere with what Hashem is giving him. Don't interfere and don't disrupt the hashpah that Hashem is giving you. Who is Baruch Zon Mefanes Lakayil? Hashem provides us all with what we need. And therefore, what I should be focusing on is not what I'm doing in the business as much as to make sure that what I'm doing should be consistent with Hashem's will. Yosem libe v'daite altiv ta'ara sakli. That the vessel should be pure. And if the vessel is pure, which means, let's look at the next line, what does it mean? The kli parnasa, that his parnasa is according to Torah. It's pure. There's no pseilis oina, which means there's nothing dishonest going on. Obviously, I'm keeping Shabbos. I'm not chazal working on Shabbos, working on Yontif. Everything that I do in the business is according to Torah and mitzvahs. The man, he observes the times of davening b'tzibur. He sets aside time for learning Torah. Doesn't let the business take away from that. And everything he does is with chayis pnimi. And by doing that, he fulfills the kavanah. So here what we're saying is, that's what the Maimon is talking about, that in truth, Hashem is not just b'shamayim, in the heavens. And down here, there's an order of nature, but Hashem is literally involved in every single detail and detail of what's happening in this physical world. The only question people have, which is the confusing part, how does it go together? Free choice, and this is what we just said here. But anything which is not related to Torah mitzvahs, choosing, which is, like you said, but grass, trees, animals, cats, dogs, what's happening in their lives, every detail is b'hashgacha pratis, where they are and what's going on in their lives. Even daimim, even things that have no life to it. But he gave the example of tzameach, because at least you see movement, and you think that this movement is just by the way because of the wind. He says, no, it's with pure intention from Hashem. So naturally, when we think about ourselves, if it says that the whole purpose of creation is really for us, for humans, and everything else that was created is to facilitate our observance of Torah and mitzvahs, it's there as part of the collective purpose, but they're the facilitators and we are fulfilling the actual purpose. So certainly what happens with us and every detail is b'hashgacha pratis. Hashem is there, he's in charge, and he's leading things and he's making things happen the way they happen. And certainly his intention is for the good and so on and so forth. So this is really, when we say everything hashgacha pratis, we throw around the word, but really it means every detail. And not only that it's being done by Hashem, but that it's part of the collective purpose of the whole creation. Okay, so now we can go back to the Maimer. And let's read it again and understand it better. So we're on Gimel, page 34, 35. What? You know, they have people that go into the forest and with cameras and they watch the life of the animal, what it does and where it goes. Imagine they focus on a blade of grass, make a whole documentary and how many times it shakes to the right, how many times it shakes to the left, and then you go give an explanation according to Chassidus and Kabbalah, what's going on with that blade of grass. No way. It's enough that we can understand that it is that way, but definitely we can't understand what's behind it. Okay, Gimel. This was his mistake to say that Hashem is in the heavens, but this world is too low for Hashem to be involved with. Hashem looks down upon the heaven and the earth, and he uses the term that he looks down, he's lowering himself to look at the heaven and the earth equally, because heaven and earth to Hashem are both equal. The highest heavens and the lowest parts of the earth are equal distance from Hashem, who's the absolute infinite. That we're not being controlled by mazalos chas v'shalom, by constellations. Yedim, we know. We believe in Hashem's supervising us, the B'chinas Hashgacha Pratis, and supervising all its details. Al kol davar shalamata ba'aretz, everything that's on earth, asher b'mayim mitachas la'aretz, even all the hidden things in the depth of the ocean. And the same would apply to the vast space. What's happening with meteorites, what's happening with stars, what's happening with planets. The people who study these things, and they have all sorts of fascinating things to tell us. This is circulating, this is flying, this is crashing, this is coming, this is going. All this is b'hashgacha pratis. When Moshe Rabbeinu brought the makas on Egypt, he said, in order for you to know, Parai, that there's no one like me, meaning Hashem, he was repeating Hashem's words. There's no one like me, b'chol ha'aretz, in the land. In other words, it wasn't that through the makas now you know that Hashem exists, but that Hashem exists and he's in charge of what goes on in the aretz. B'chol ha'aretz datke. There's another pasuk where it says that you should tell others about my name, b'chol ha'aretz, in the whole land. The wording is very precise, dafka aretz, because that's where Paro was making a mistake. In other words, Paro was a klipa, and the purpose of the makas was to break that klipa. This was all about changing and making them aware of their mistakes. That Hashem abandoned the earth. That this is too low, so it's being run by the constellations. Hashem has no part in how things run on the earth. It's all in Hashem's hands, and he's the one. There's nobody that could stop Hashem from doing what he wants in earth. It's not like this is someone else's territory. In other words, this is really what Yidden have in Amunah. And we know, this is what we received from Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu received this from Hashem. As it says in the Pasuk, you should know today, and you should take this to your heart. What should you know? That Hashem is Elokim on the heavens above and the earth below, which means that just like Hashem is in charge of everything on the heavens above, that's how he's in charge of every single detail on the earth below. And that's also the difference between Havaya and Elokim. Pirish, let's go to the next line. Pari Omar, mi Havaya. When they said to Pari, Hashem, in this week's parsha, Hashem said, let the Jews, people leave Mitzrayim. He said, I don't know Havaya. So the wording is also precise. He didn't say, I don't know Elokim. I don't know Havaya. Shem Elokim, he recognized, but not Shem Havaya. What's Shem Elokim? Shem Elokim to him is how Hashem set up an order of nature, and that order of nature sort of functions and flows by itself. You're telling me there's something that's beyond that, and that controls even the nature, that he didn't recognize. In Shulchan Aruch, when it talks about having intention and davening, to think about the meaning of the words, it says that the name Elokim means koyach. Hashem is the source of all the power and all the abilities that we have in this world. Like there's a pasuk, it says Eilei ha'aretz. It means the mighty men of the land. So we see this word Aleph Lamed Yud means might. Like Yosef said to him, Elokim Yanesh Leim Parei. He didn't say Havai, he said Elokim. Shehaven, he understood the Fidaita Shakeich HaMashpir Lo Yanesh Leim. That the source where he gets chayes from, which is named Elokim. So basically, Havaya is what gives Chayas in the higher worlds. Elokim is nature. We know it's B'gematria Elokim. And the pasuk that Havaya is Elokim comes to teach us that Havaya and Elokim are really one. That it's all the same. There is no difference. And just like Hashem runs everything up there, He runs everything down here. Okay, we'll stop here.
Thank you. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If there is Chassidus goddess everywhere and everything goes in it, so why do we wish not as well for this stuff, but Mazal?